All right. Hey everybody, it is Date with a Debut time. Nick Wasiliev here on beautiful Awabakal Country. I'm host of the show, you know who I am, and for today's episode we dive into a world of chaotic romance, second chances, witty banter, single parenting, and radio. For today, I chat with a woman who has over 15 years of commercial radio experience working all around Australia. She's also worked at Mamma Mia. She's just down the road from me, working at a podcast consultancy business, Think Loud. Stephanie MacFie, whose romcom Once Upon a Breakfast Show is published by the wonderful folks over at Text Publishing. You can get that down in the description box at your local bookstore. Check it out at your local library. Check it out online. Wherever it is available. Joining me all the way from the Central Coast this afternoon, Steph, welcome to Date with a Debut.
My goodness, what an introduction. I am hyped.
Oh, you're too kind. It's easy to hype because you've had an incredible career. We were just talking off air, done a little bit of radio myself, not remotely as much as you, but it's a fun, crazy environment, and it's why I kind of really loved this book when it was presented to me. And you've done radio-related activities. Okay, I've wrote it down.
Yeah, go for it.
Noosa, Melbourne, Armidale, Orange, Launceston, Hobart, Adelaide, and now you're doing this consultancy business on the Central Coast, and you've also done like Mamma Mia. Did I miss any places?
No, I think you got them all. I think one end of the country to the other, all the East Coast and wrap it around.
I was going to say, insane career. Radio does take you to some amazing places, and now you can add being an author to that list. So to hit you with a softball opener, where do books sit in the head and the mindset of Steph?
Oh, something that I've always enjoyed. I've always been an avid reader. So books are something that's always been a bit of escapism for me. I have always loved reading, and then as sort of I got more time poor, I loved listening to audiobooks. I love audio narrative. And so books sort of, to me, and where they sit in my mind and where they are is just this, place of escapism and this place of learning and a place to sort of step out of reality.
Out of curiosity, it's a good chance to ask this question because I've had, so many people who've done other creative ventures like film or television, who kind of decided to turn their creative juices towards something like a book. And now it's a great opportunity. I've never had someone who's actually been involved a lot in radio involved like this. You said in an interview with, I think it was Radio Today, where you basically said, I've done every single layer of breakfast radio. You've done on air, you've done behind the desk, you've done the content meetings, you've done strategy, and I think you talk about how personal stories frequently become ratings arcs. You know what happens when you're on air, and then you land the amount of work that takes to land a moment on radio, as no matter what's going on off air, there's so much pressure with that sort of staged environment. Out of curiosity, does the creative process of writing a book, how does that compare to, say, the process of creating a radio show, and more specifically creating a radio show that has those moments that kind of make it land?
I guess for me, and that was probably the most interesting part and why I was able to write Once Upon a Breakfast Show at the pace I did, I think, is because once I had the idea, I then decided how would this play out on air if someone came to me with this idea, and exactly what would be the radio way to follow. And that's exactly how the whole story is done. So if I had a breakfast announcer that came to me and said, I want to find a long lost love, I would say, great, this is, Tears Mean Ticks, we're in, this is radio gold. Let's figure out the best way to invite our audience along for the journey. How are we going to do that? Let's look if we can look at the places you went. Let's see if we can get any photos from the time. Let's scour some social media. Let's have a look at some prizes that we can give away in conjunction with that. Who can we talk to from that time? And, this one in my book, they flash back to an event, to a music festival. So if I was a content director and if I was going through this with a breakfast host, I'd say, let's get the organizers from that event to come on the radio. And then exactly it plays out in the book as well, let's get a police sketch artist to draw a picture of this mystery man. Everything that happened in the book and everything that I was able to plan out for the radio portion of things was exactly what I would do if someone came to me with that exact idea.
That's so smart. Out of curiosity, have you been able to do, all right, I'm going to just go out on a limb here and throw a fun question out because obviously book promotion there's a whole treadmill in that as well. Have you been able to, because there are so many fun little moments and crazy things that come through with this whole breakfast show scenario that you present to us. Have you been able to actually like recreate them or do anything kind of a similarly chaotic nature in the rollout of this book? Because you've begun to book places, anything you should.
I know. No, this is actually really bad. But I had this like great idea of like how I could promote this book before the book came out. And I was like, I'm going to get all my friends who are in radio to sort of act out some of the scenes in radio and get them to send them to me. And I got a couple to do so. And it was all like, that's what I was going to do. I was going to get into all the breakfast shows I know around the country and I'll get them to help me out here. And because radio is just brutal at the moment and the Australian media climate is atrocious and terrifying and scary, a lot of the breakfast shows I'd really sort of planned to hook into and lean into for a lot of these little cameos that I was hoping for were all made redundant about a month before the book came out. And like, it was insane how it happened. And so all these people who'd been really big supporters of me and really helping me along for this journey, just, their roles have been sort of dissolved. And luckily, like a lot of them have moved on to podcasts and moved on to other areas and I'm joining them on podcasts and things, but I can hardly be like, hey, come and help me promote my book about that radio when you've just been made redundant from the very place.
It's definitely a topic that I'll definitely pick your brains about a little bit later in the show because, I mean, I've had a lot of friends. I mean, I work daily as a journalist and the environment is very similar, like exactly the same, whether it be at Southern Cross Stereo or, other places around the country, NBN, Nova. It's a very, very tough environment. But again, it's a topic for a little bit later. But off the back of that, I mean, there's a process of getting published. Everyone kind of has to go through that rigmarole and have that experience. And when Tex approached me, I was like, oh, this looks like such a fun, awesome rom-com. Books like that are just, people love those books right now. They're fantastic. They're the ultimate escape genre. So talk to me about your experience of getting published with Tex Publishing and how you enjoyed that experience.
Yeah, I don't have a great sort of story on that front, only because it was a really quick process for me. I wrote the book in quite a short space of time, but once I finished the book, I felt like I'd wasted time writing. I was feeling a little bit like I'd left my job, I'd written full time, so I just wrote the book in this bit of a frenzy and a bit of a point, not shame, but just quietly. And so when I finished, I was like, okay, this could be a big ass bowl of alphabet soup. I don't know. I don't have any point of reference. I'm not a writer. I don't know what I've done other than produce 100,000 words of what could be just crap. So rather than spend any more time on it, I read it once and thought I'll do a quick edit on like what I can do. I made sure that there wasn't too many grammar issues, and I sort of went through my Word doc and like tried to read it all. And I was like, I could be editing this until the day I die. Like every time I read it and reread it, I just thought I can edit this out or I could take this out. And I reckon I was nearly towards the end of it. And I was like, I cannot read this again because there's just so much. It's like, I'll just send it. So I Googled like, how do you get a book published? And like, because I'm not from this industry. I'm from another industry entirely. And, there was like, oh, you can get an agent, you can do this, you can do that. And I was like, oh, that sounds like a lot of effort. And I was reading, it could be 12 months, it could be 2 years. You could shop it around that your first book doesn't get published or picked up. I was like, oh, this is overwhelming. And then suddenly I saw that Tex Publishing, who took it, their books were open like the following week or whatever it was. They opened their sort of for unsolicited or unagent authors. They just open their books up and say,
call out.
Send us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was only on a whim that I was like, all right, well, let's just send it and I'll just see how it goes. If it's a load of crap, I'll learn pretty quickly. And then I was like, if I get some feedback on it, then I can look at where I'll go after that. I could go to an agent. I could just get some guidance on it. I thought maybe they'll reply. Anyway, a week later, I get an email saying, can we have the full manuscript? And I was like, oh, okay. Sent through the full manuscript. Then I sort of got to talking with Jane, my editor there, my publisher there, and she was coming back and forth with me and she was saying like, oh, do you think you could change this POV? Do you think you could cut this down a little bit? Or this is a little bit wordy. She sort of gave me a few little assignments, I think little tests. And then each time I'd get back to them, I'm someone who, I love feedback. So as soon as she was like, do this, I was like, yeah, sure. Like, things about books. So I don't know things about books. I'll just do that. And I'd quickly get them back to her and she's like, no hurry on that. And I was like, oh no, here it is. Anyway, about 2-3 weeks later, she made me an offer and I was signed with text. So it was a very quick process from, I think, the start of June I submitted. I started writing in end of April, start of May. By mid-June or start of June, I submitted, and by the end of June, I had a book deal. And then here we are, 14 months later with a book on the shelves.
That's what we call a dream run, and I'm not surprised that it's a great example to say to people, there's no have a crack at that general call out, because every publisher does it, and if you have a book that fits really, really nicely, you can get picked up. That is a way that you can do it. It can often seem quite overwhelming because there's so many. You'd assume there'd be hundreds of people submitting manuscripts, and there are, but you might get something that perfectly fits with what they're looking for. And so it's a good example and a good story of, hey, have a crack. There's no shame at all.
Yeah, I've been since this has come out and, people learned that I'm writing books and that I put this out into the world, I get asked all the time, oh, I'm writing a book and I'd love to know what to do with it. I'm still editing, or I wrote a book last year. And I'm like, why don't you just send it in? They'll give you the feedback. They'll know. And the nice thing about, and I know from my experience, they worked with me the whole time to edit it into something that was commercially viable, that was something other people wanted to read. What I had and what I knew I had from the start was a strong story. I've made content for radio and I've built audio narrative for so long now. I know what resonates with an audience. I know how they're entertained. I know the key points that people connect with. And I was able to sort of build that out. So I knew conceptually that I had a good idea. What I didn't have was the background in, writing and, putting pen to paper and understanding of the industry. But they were able to guide me through all of that process. They took my story and really helped me.
And I will say, you've absolutely nailed the writer imposter syndrome. Every single author I've encountered always thinks that their first draft is alphabet soup. So yeah. Nailed it to a T. Ad break time. Stop the podcast. Hey everyone, just thought I'd stop to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Podpixels, the Trent Dalton of professional podcast platforms. Question: do you have a desire for a great podcast? How are you going to build it? What about the design work? Won't it cost a fortune? Fear not, for Podpixels is a simple, done-for-you website service built specifically for podcasts. They are here to deliver that professional look to your podcast, to make it easier for listeners to find your show, and all for one great monthly price. From hobbyists to pros, Podpixels has you covered. Their team provides domains, website hosting, backup, security, and support, handling the full setup and making sure that your show is up to date and allowing you to focus on what you do best, podcast. With Podpixels, you can achieve your full podcasting vision. They are the ultimate one-stop solution for anyone looking to build an online home for their podcast. Check them out below in the show notes and tell them that Nick from Date with a Day Boo sent you. Thank you, Podpixels, for sponsoring the show. Let's talk about this book. I think now is a great time to dive in to talk about this awesome book, Once Upon a Breakfast Show. For everyone listening, or everyone watching on YouTube, I've got this cover up on screen. I've got my copy right here. Dived through it in the last couple of days. Really enjoyed it. And now we're at the point of the show where it's time for the classic elevator pitch.
Yep.
So let's do it. Actually, we're here on a podcast. We're live on air. You have 1 minute to pitch it to me. What is Once Upon a Breakfast Show about?
Once Upon a Breakfast Show follows the story of Emily Blake, one half of Melbourne's #1 breakfast show, Mac and Blake in the Morning. And Blake is notorious for sharing her pretty disastrous love life with her radio audience. And after one particularly bad date, she gets to thinking about a whirlwind affair she had 13 years earlier with a super hot musician. And the result of that week together is her now 12-year-old daughter. And so with her daughter's permission, she takes it to her radio audience to help her find the one that got away.
Nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. Smack. Perfect description, and leaving us with lots and lots of tenterhooks. And I will say, for everyone listening who loves a good romantic comedy, what I love about this book is this is a book not just with chaos, and it nails the fast track, adrenaline filled, almost borderline ADHD environment that is radio. But this is a book about finding love particularly when you live an extremely public lifestyle in that rapid speed world. You're live on air. Everything has to land. When you're off air, producers are coming through the doors with their clipboard, giving you detail after detail, and you've got to get everything right. It's a story about second chances in love, but it's also a story about parenting. It's a story about single parenting. I love that first scene of the book, which kind of shows the soul of this story that Emily finds herself in. She's juggling copies, rushing through the radio station car park, her daughter Morgan in tow. And Morgan seems to be the one, despite being 12, seems like way more on the ball than she is. She has that maturity that Emily often talks about. And Emily loves her daughter, but she's also stretched by this hectic career that she has. It's also really focuses on that idea of, single parenting when finding the one that got away becomes a topic of media and entertainment in the station. Also, funnily enough, I really enjoyed what you kind of had to say about the space that those topics of parenting actually have, where they hold within social media or within media discourse rather, because often you have to focus with the mindset or the lens of entertainment, and it can come sometimes at the expense of personal connection. And I imagine there was quite a lot of pulling from your past, not just for the details of being in a radio station in a fast-paced environment, but pulling from your past to examine this within the themes of this book as well.
Yeah, I've certainly worked with, I think nearly all the female breakfast hosts I've worked with are parents and mums. And I mean, so many of the males as well. But it really is that fine line and finding balance between what they can share about their kids and their personal lives and what their kids might not want them sharing as well. And, those kids have to go to school the next morning. And I'll give an example. For me, my mum was on radio when I was a young girl. And I remember she used to be on the ABC radio. She used to do a segment. And one morning she told a story about how my sister and I would always fight in the car over who got to play air drums and who got to play air guitar to Dire Straits' Money for Nothing. And she told this story like it was the funniest thing in the whole wide world. But I remember when I got to school the next day, people being like, "Oh, you're going to play some Dire Straits and Money for Nothing?" And I don't know. And it was just this "Oh, Mum, you're so embarrassing." Like that. Like, how dare you tell people that we all play air guitar in the car? As a, 10-year-old girl, that's mortifying. And so that was one of the things that was driving, is that when you're a parent and you've got this platform that you can share on and you're live, there's no editing it down, there's no cutting it. If you say the wrong thing or if you're in the moment and you get caught up in it, that's once it's out there, it's out there. And the people who listen, they grab onto that and they hold on to that. And when you're in a really big, bigger radio station, those things can become headlines. Those things can be picked up by the Daily Mail. They can be they can take one line of what you say and turn it 100 different ways. So it really is about being in the spotlight and balancing that sort of position of power when it comes to what you say has real life consequences.
You're right. There is a real perception versus reality kind of element to this story. And again, it's a great sneak peek behind the curtain of that environment. There's a great scene actually that I think of that is when because at the start of the book, Morgan's actually starting in high school for the first time, and she has that kind of moment, although I think it's more of a teenager being like, I don't want to be embarrassed in front of my mum kind of moment, where she says, I don't want you to walk me into school. She leaves, and yet they have this wonderful dichotomy of hearing herself in playback on the radio. She's all confident. She's got that wonderful radio voice, and yet here in this environment, she's on the verge of tears. And then you also have that contrast when you get to the station with Steve, that argue some of the moments with Steve, who kind
Our
of
content director,
embodies that kind of cutthroat nature of commercial radio, deciding to make Blake's love life just that kind of dating or ditching, spin the wheel sort of making content environment. And whenever she kind of protests it, because there's that kind of line between her own personal element and the idea of entertainment, his response just made me go, yeah, there it is. It kind of age doesn't matter, ratings do. It's entertainment. Isn't that why you're here? Which can be just, if there isn't a moment that explains the kind of the cutthroat nature of it. I mean, of course, I should add, and we'll get to it a little bit later when we talk about some of the other characters around around Emily. Like there's also a lot of joy in that environment, and you're kind of in that trenches as well. But it also shows that cutthroat nature. This is kind of the crux of this story a lot. Like, talk to me about Blake and Morgan especially, because I feel like the dynamic here is really something quite beautiful. I mean, you capture it brilliantly on the page where we find these two before they go on this journey of trying to find this whirlwind, the father in this figure that has kind of been missing. Talk to me about it, because it is a great dynamic you have, even though it's one where they're both challenged quite a bit.
Yeah, it's funny. When I set out to write this book, I really had this fairy tale romance in my mind, and I knew the end game. I knew what the very end moment would be. What I didn't realize when I was writing this book is how much that, relationships are core to this novel, but I really think the relationship between Morgan and Blake is probably the, pivotal relationship within the whole book. It's not necessarily about our leading man or necessarily about the relationships that we have with our co-hosts or our friends. There's this really, beautiful thread of this mother-daughter relationship that even when I started writing, I didn't know it really developed through the course of the book. And it was something that I absolutely loved writing. And I feel like I could write Morgan's story forever. I really love her. I really love how she responds to things. And that's one of the things when you're writing is like you put, your characters in these scenarios and then you find out how they respond to each scenario. And I was able to do that with Morgan a number of times over, where I sort of had to step back and think, how would she respond at each point in the book? And, thinking with her mind and her lens was just, it was really magical. I really enjoy Morgan as a character, and I really enjoyed building their relationship. So as you mentioned earlier, Morgan is the maturity. She's the sensible one. She's got this sort of very organized brain, and Blake, our breakfast announcer, is the chaotic one. She's messy. She's got coffee stains on her shirt. She is just, she's running late all the time. Her pace is so quick and Morgan's pace is so measured by comparison that they really are the ultimate pair. They just, I think the relationship key to the whole book is those two.
I think it also works because, like, within that lens, of course, like, Morgan's only 12 at the start of this book, and she's growing up.
Yeah.
And she's kind of that. It's that I think that's where, like, she's on, becoming an adult, gradually growing, and she's asking those sorts of questions that, of course, any sort of child will be wanting to ask if they didn't grow up knowing one of their parents. Yeah. And I think that's kind of where I really loved this. It also brings out a lot of good things in Emily, I think, because one of the key elements of Emily, and it's a key part of this story, I mean, it's literally mentioned in the blurb, is that, she's often finding herself in this situation where she talks about very private things in a very public space. Yeah. And anyone who's been in that environment, you are subject to controversies, ridicule, you get mud flung at you from all angles. I mean, funnily enough, when you mentioned Osher, you mentioned Osher a few times. Like, I had a bit of a double take moment, because I was lucky enough to actually talk to him when I was working back at Booktopia on their podcast about actually managing that sort of environment. And, like, for example, hosting The Bachelor and talking about managing the sincerity of someone's love story when they get rejected or get knocked back and that's just obviously in the television context. And yet, he has to say, "I'm sorry, you didn't receive a rose." He's saying it with sincerity, but, like, for someone watching on television, that's something to gawk at. It's something to go, "Oh, look at you! Look at this poor person." And that's where Emily kind of is sitting right now, like, in that position where we see her at the start of this story.
Yeah, I think it's just that living in the public eye is just, it's such a fine balance. And I've worked with some incredible, people in media over the years who do it really well. And I've also seen some people really struggle with it as well.
You're absolutely right. I think it's helped as well by, we have that kind of the great setting around Emily that kind of sells this story. Like, again, this is a really funny book. I feel like we're talking about these kind of themes and topics earlier, but the humor is great in this story. I love the on-air banter, the banter inside this office. You kind of... like, you nailed the voice of radio, like, just that hyper reality, that confident radio voices people have. I mean, like, Rap Chelsea and Cotton Wool.
Bless.
like she has to navigate Emily through so much stuff, like as a producer. I mean, Steve, just boo him. Boo Steve.
Yeah, what a dick.
What a dick. Absolutely right. And of course, Mac, the co-host, and like, you know, they seem great on air together, but they've got a very interesting dynamic off the mic, which of course I won't spoil. But I mean, talk to me about this group in this radio station, because this is one of the funnest parts of what makes this story work.
Yeah, I think it was funny. Like, you've obviously got to put in a couple of red herrings in there as well with who could be our romantic lead. And I think when people start reading the book or they read the title, they think, oh, two breakfast hosts are going to fall in love. And it was very clear early on that two breakfast hosts were certainly not going to fall in love. But there's characters in there, and I don't mean this is not reflective of necessarily shows that I've worked with, but for me, Mac, our co-host, was deliberately quite two-dimensional. And I say that so gently, in that he really is just a bit of ego, he's egotistical, but he's not a bad guy, but he's not a good guy either. Like, he's so sort of neutral. He does some good things and he helps out Emily when he can, but he'll also throw her under the bus quite quickly on air. So it's just that fine balance of not everyone needs these big, deep background stories or to have sort of redeeming qualities, because I don't think he has any. And I wanted to make sure that I sort of invested in characters that people might invest in as well, but also just gave a snapshot of, you know, any workplace is like that. There's people who are there just to work. There's people who are there to socialize. There's people who are there to win. And I hope I was able to sort of divide up each of those personalities to showcase that.
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely did. And I think, like, again, going back to Mac, like, it kind of, the way you presented him, like, in that kind of two-dimensional but honest way, like, it kind of didn't surprise me from my own couple of experiences in radio. And I feel like that's bad to say it, but it's like, I've met, you can meet Macs a lot in that sort of environment. There are a lot of Macs out there. As similarly, there are a lot of Chelseas who, you know, are just working their asses off to make the show work. Like, it was, maybe it's just from my own content producer background, but it's also was just like, yeah, I see how hard you're working over there, Chelsea, and I'm appreciating you so much. And
but
obviously,
the social media girl who's there putting up the post, and you've got, you know, your cool girl sort of reading the news. There's a whole cast of people who sort of, you know, bring a radio show to life. And I think when people are so connected to their local radio announcers. Like, people feel really strong connections to the people they hear every day on the radio. The radio people share their lives. It's not like morning television where you sort of get this like hyper polished version. Radio's the opposite to that. It's very real. It's very vulnerable. And then you've got what you don't see when you listen to the radio every day is everyone in behind the scenes making sure that everything runs smoothly. I mean, people reveal their whole lives in 3-minute segments. It takes a lot to get that to air. So someone in the background, like a Chelsea, an executive producer, would be absolutely run off their feet, organising the next guest, calling the next person, finding someone before the 8 a.m. news to get live on air. Like, that sort of, that frantic runaround is so real. Same with, you know, the social media producer making sure she catches every moment that needs to happen. And yeah, like, I just wanted to give it life of what it's like behind the scenes in radio.
You're absolutely. That's a good point you mentioned, actually, on the topic of the audience being connected, particularly to the host, because this whirlwind culminates in Blake asking, you know, kind of putting it out into the ether to help find the man that got away, which is kind of a key part of that. You know, she had this whirlwind week romance, was left with a daughter, and, you know, again, as we say, Morgan's in this situation where she wants to know about her dad, and, you know, of course, there's a lot of stops on the way, lots of crazy stuff that happens on air, but that leads us to Leo. Just talk to me about Leo.
Oh, isn't he beautiful? He's just Leo is a dream in my mind. I think that, you know, he is polite, he is charming, he gives everything that you want from your like naughties romantic lead. I think he's really,
yes.
Yeah, he feels very classic.
Yes. Oh, it's true. Now you've mentioned. Now I feel like that. Like, I can see so many. Like, I'm trying to think of a good. Oh my god, I'm jumping a blank on like good 90s, like noughties rom-coms, or
you know, he could be your Hugh Grant lead. Like, he really is. he's funny, but he's not, he's serious, but not too serious. You can tell
Mm,
he's head over heels. He he's someone who loves, which is really nice. Like, there's not
mm.
sort of a point of, there's not a lot of assholery. It's no like, enemies to lovers or anything like that. This is a really nice guy that she met, and he's someone who treated her really well in their time together. And I think that's, quite sweet and quite nice. He really is. He's the Prince Charming of it all. He really is such a lovely guy.
Yes, that's it. That's you nailed it. Like he's just there's no bull crap.
Mm.
He's just a solid, reliable dude,
Yeah, he was
which
lovely in
is
their
is
time.
great. Yeah, and I love the themes that kind of come through in that through kind of rediscovering him because again, as you've alluded to, this is all happening in a public space at the same time. This romance in the background, you're showing the pressure of the ratings, you're showing the mischances, but there's also a key lesson here, Emily, which is kind of going back to it. We talked about it, alluded, which is that self-determination through those trials and tribulations. There's also very she's gone through lots of trials and issues, but also she's had a lot of intense joy being a single parent. And it's not just a simple case of, oh, yeah, I'll just have you back.
No,
I'm trying to stay as spoiler free as I can on
I know.
details here. I'm sorry. But kind of going back to what it says on the black on the blurb, I'll use those words, that she ultimately takes control of her own story, which in a way, of course, this is a rom-com and it's a romance, but it also makes it a self-love. That's kind of as much a romance element of this story as much as it is kind of the romantic element that blossoms or rekindles between these two.
Yeah, and I think I wrote it in two parts and in sort of two states of mind as well. I think I wrote a book for, women in their 30s, for mums, for, all the chaos, the mental load and everything that we face. But we also love like a classic romance, but we're also not 21 anymore. So I think because the book, and what we haven't said here yet, is it does flash back to 2013, to when they were sort of when Emily met Leo. And so we get the flashbacks, we get all the recipe of young love, but then it has to fit into the now, and it has to fit into balancing real life, and it has to fit into sort of where Blake is in her life in her mid-30s, with a daughter starting high school and becoming a teenager, and this coming of age sort of happening in the background. How would a rock star from 13 years ago fit into that life? And that's a question that she constantly asks. And I think she's quite sensible in how she approaches it. She's not looking for her long lost love. She's looking for, the father to her daughter. She's looking for sort of, does he know? Should he know? There's, a lot of questions that come up in that space as well. And I don't think she approaches it too naively. I think she's really sensible in how she thinks about it and sort of goes about it.
You're absolutely right. And this leads actually nicely onto a kind of good ending point, because obviously trying to stay as spoiler free as I can, and for everyone who is listening, just go read the damn thing. It's so much fun. It's so joy. And there's so many wonderful moments in this book. Again, great sense of humor. And I think the great sense of humor works because it's intermixed with big challenges of parenting and relationships. And I can't remember the place where you said it, but you kind of mentioned that you said that this book came to you at a time where you described, actually, no, you described it in the acknowledgements. That's where I saw it. The acknowledgements of this book, that you wrote this book in a period of identity loss. Like you kind of had and so I kind of instead want to finish off by asking, what did the action of writing Once Upon a Breakfast, what did it teach you? And more critically as well, did this book help you find yourself again?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was a really interesting time for me before writing this book, in that I had been made redundant 18 months earlier from my radio job, which left me pretty lost. I was 12 weeks postpartum with my second born, so I was feeling pretty lost at that time. And I did have the idea for the novel at that time, but I just didn't really know what it was. I sort of thought maybe an audio narrative or something. Anyway, then I went and got a big fancy job in the city working with another media group in a dream role. Like, it was, every part of it was what I'd worked so hard for. All my years in the media sort of accumulated to this very point in time. But what I didn't really factor in was the fact that it was in Sydney. I was on the Central Coast. I was, traveling 3-4 hours a day to and from work. I had kids in full-time daycare, so I'd have to drop them off. I was waiting at the gates of daycare to walk them in at 7 a.m. and I was the last person to pick them up. It was a lot for my kids. My husband works FIFO in the mines. And so one morning I was rushing the kids to get out the door, and I was getting pretty tired and frustrated with them. And I snapped at my eldest and just said, like, Mum's got to get to work. Mum has to get to work today. Mum can't afford to lose her job. And Mum's got to go to work. And he sort of looked at me. I'm like, do you want Mum to quit her job? Do you want Mum not to go to work anymore? And he just, bless his heart, like, he just burst into tears and he said, Mum, I've really missed you. And it was in that moment, I know, it was in that moment that I just thought, I can't do it. I can't be traveling to Sydney. I can't be putting everyone else's stories and content and everything else above what was going on in my own backyard. It wasn't fair to my family. It wasn't fair to me either. I was missing out on these really wonderful moments with, at the time, a 4-year-old and an 18-month-year-old. And so, nearly 2-year-old. And so I just decided that I wasn't going to do it anymore. And by the end of the week, I'd sort of said, I'm done. And I got home and I had no idea what I was going to do with myself. And so I started, once my husband flew back out and went back to work, he was away for a couple of swings in a row, and I started writing. And I have written every day of my working career. I've written press, I'd do 7, 8, 9 press releases a day sometimes. I have written getting guests online, making sure I'm putting my, breakfast shows and whatnot, putting them front and center to be picked up by television, by magazines, by everything else. I've always done a lot of physical writing. I, would easily write 10,000 words a day just of putting things out there. And so I said, what would it take to start writing something? And I started writing this book, and I set myself the goal to write between 1,200 and 2,800 words a day. And I just did it every day for 5 weeks. And that's when I had my big alphabet soup bowl. And it was just this time where I was completely lost, because I knew that I couldn't go back to corporate. I knew that I didn't want to be working in the city anymore. I had no idea what I was actually going to do. And so I just put it into writing. I just every day got up and wrote one chapter, and every day I would open a new Word document. So I didn't do it in I didn't know the best way to write. I didn't know what you're meant to do. I just every day opened a brand new Word doc and just wrote chapter 10, chapter 11. And I just wrote to that chapter for the whole day whilst the kids were at school. I didn't unenroll them. I didn't quite, because I wasn't sure what I was going to do for work. And then when I finished, I sent it out into the ether, as we said earlier. And then I was like, okay, well, that's done. And now I can go look at what I'm going to do with my life. And so it really was finding myself, and then learning that, that it did resonate, and that it was picked up, that the people at Text read it, and it went right around the building. And I had messages from all of them when I was signed saying that they'd read it and connected with it. It was in that moment that I thought, I can do things that aren't sort of telling other people's stories, which I'd done for a really long time on radio, and really facilitated a lot of other people's careers and grown that. It was sort of this nice sobering moment of realizing that I could do it for myself a little bit, and find who I was outside of radio and commercial audio.
Writing for yourself is hard. You can do it for a job, but particularly when you're adjusting to trying to write a book or your own creative process, sometimes it can be really, really hard. Particularly, I found a lot of authors find it very, very hard to write about themselves because you're just so focused on that process or whatever. But I will say, you should be super proud of it. It's a really good book.
Thank you. Thank you.
And, I think often it can be something that, books you're so caught in the process, but I think it's a fantastic story, and there's a reason why it does resonate. And it's because that it's talking about in what seems like a never ending, fast, crazy, chaotic world. It talks and it highlights the focus on what you should be focusing on. Ultimately, the things that genuinely do bring you happiness. It's not to say that there isn't enjoyment to be had in fun commercial radio and things like that, but ultimately, the things that bring you happiness in life are something that, is when you love yourself as much as the other people around you. And out of curiosity, would you write again? Will you write again? Will there be more?
Yeah, I honestly, on the back of this, I loved writing. Anything I get in the habit of, I'll do. So I was certainly in the habit of writing after I wrote this, and I wrote a second book, which happened pretty quickly. And so that's sort of, in the works at the moment. And then I started writing a third book. So I've got more books to come over the next few years. So I think there's definitely lots of stories in me.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm so excited to hear about it. And I'm so excited to see this book go out and do the rounds and be, incredibly popular. I think it's such a wonderful story. And, you know, if anyone who is a massive fan of romance, I reckon this is going to be absolutely your cup of tea. Hey everyone, Nick here. I'm excited to announce that I've launched a brand new book newsletter featuring book reviews, recommendations, latest news from the publishing world, opinion pieces, short stories, and more. One monthly newsletter, no spam, just the good book stuff. The sort of email you're glad shows up in your inbox. Sign up now for free, and for a small additional monthly fee, get early access to Date with a Debut episodes and exclusive content, including special extra episodes with our guests, Second Date, where they run another gauntlet of rapid-fire questions. Subscribe to my newsletter in the show notes below. We'll finish off our fun little podcast, our fun little date, with a series of rapid-fire questions where I basically fling a bunch of questions at Steph, and she has to give me the first answer that comes to her head. Steph, are you ready?
Go for it.
All right. Aha! Prepare yourself.
Fire away.
Of course, being a book podcast, we always love to start with topics of books and discussions around books. And my first favorite question to ask is, what's your favorite book that you have read in the last 12 months?
I just read The Wedding Forecast by Nina Kenwood, and I love it. I just love her writing. I really enjoy her. So yeah, that's probably been my favorite this year.
Oh, yeah, Nina Kenwood, I love her writing. I think she's got a fantastic voice on the page, and she just absolutely nails it. There's so much joy in her books as well, but she also can tackle those topics with a lot of care. I love her reading. Off the back of that, what's your favorite debut novel that you've ever read?
I don't know. I've been reading all the text authors because they have been honestly so good. They've such a cool group of girls that are publishing, or women publishing with text. So I have been diving into all of their books because they were so generous to read my book so quickly and be like, I loved your book. So I've gone on and read Olivia's side character Energy. I'm listening to the audiobook of that at the moment. I love Bridie Blake's book as well, The Boyfriend Clause. I really enjoyed that. I also did that as a audiobook, and I did it on a car trip. I was driving to Canberra, and between the drive there and back, I sort of listened to the whole thing, and it was so engrossing. And I just thought, I loved how fresh and easy and lighthearted, and it just ticks so many boxes. And I'm embarrassed to admit that before sort of putting this book into the world, I didn't know how great we had, Aussie writers were. I was I've always listened to, I'm a tragic. I love the Colleen Hoovers and the Emily Henrys, and I just devour books. I often listen to audiobooks. Sometimes I read books, but I just sort of consume that at quite a high rate. It wasn't until I wrote this book that I really started engaging with them a little bit more, and I'm trying to get through so many Australian authors because I underestimated how good we were, and I think we are really, really good. And it's so nice to hear sort of towns or references and to feel really connected. So I'm deep diving into that at the moment.
That is the best answer to that question. I'm not gonna lie, I'm so glad to hear that you writing this book has made you discover more writers, because I had Claudine Tinellis, who does Talking Aussie Books, on it. We talked a few weeks ago, and how things like your Colin Hoovers, your Emily Henrys, your Taylor Jenkins Reid, so they're a great way in, but there are so many fantastic local authors here who are bringing out brilliant rom-coms, who are bringing out great psychological thrillers, who are bringing out crime, who are bringing out everything. We do actually, I feel like Aussie authors really do punch above their weight. And so I love that you kind of went and discovered a bunch. And like I said to her, that opening chapter is one of the funniest openings to a rom-com novel I've ever read in my entire life. We can talk about it. It's been out for a few months now, guys. You can we'll talk about it here, but vomiting on your romantic interest foot in the lift.
On Bridie Blake. Yeah, it's so
perfect
good.
Introduction. Yeah.
It was that moment, I think, and that was sort of my first toe in the water of these text authors she'd just read my book, and I was like, I've got to get onto hers, and that chuck in the lift. It was just magic. It was really beautiful. And it felt Australian too. I really
Yes.
felt like, yeah. And when you go enemies to lovers, you know, there's sometimes they take them way too far. He was like, he's grumpy, but he's not too much. Like, they're just lovely characters. And it really is a really nice cast. It's a fairly small cast for a book as well, so you don't have too many people to follow. But it is just such a heartwarming, easy read. Like, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the funniest? I'm imagining, like, in the editing process, you might have had to have left a bunch of stuff on the cutting room floor. What's the funniest radio story? Because I know that you would have had a lot more radio stories. What's the funniest radio story that you had, like, that you might have written for this, but you had to leave on the cutting room floor?
I think most of our radio stories made it into it.
Really?
Yeah, I would say that the only cuts really made to the book were all the flashbacks. The flashbacks were probably, so I cut 20,000 words from the book in total. It was 100,000 when I submitted it, and it cut down to 80,000. But no sort of plots were really removed and no great radio stories. It was really just a bit wordy between the flashbacks, and I sort of got very caught up in the romance of Leo a little bit and sort of over explaining everything. Whereas I think once we cut it down, we just made it a little bit more of a mystery.
Yeah, that's fair. It's kind of like I always find it like this one thing that books like this do. I mean, I had Whitney Fitzsimmons on, and she used to work at the ABC for many years, and she was like, yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions about journalism, and she actually tried to like break a couple down in her crime novel as well. Is there a particular, you know, for any people who are listening, is there like one thing about radio that you like, that you think should be pushed a little bit more? Is there something that's kind of overhyped when it comes to radio? Is there something that you think, you know, in that environment that you wish you could change in terms of perceptions about radio?
Just that I think that it's so sad that we've let radio go to the wayside, and that we don't tune in. That, you know, it's nice to brag that you don't listen to the radio anymore, but these are people who are putting themselves out there every single day, who have connected with audiences for so long. And it's not really a flex to say that you've got your own Spotify playlist now, that you're not listening to the radio because they play the same songs all the time. It was actually like, local radio is such an amazing thing. It supports local businesses. It employs local people. You know, it's the heart of communities. It let you know if there was bushfires coming, if there was rain coming. Like, radio is so central to so many towns, and I'm so disappointed that radio has sort of finished like this in the way that it is. So I guess the thing that I want people to know about radio is that you don't get brownie points for saying that you listen to Spotify. You don't get brownie points for saying you don't listen to the local radio anymore, or that you don't like commercial radio, because that commercial station was supporting your town, your community, and it was employing local people. So I think that's probably the thing that I want people to know about radio, that I absolutely could not put in the book because boring.
Yeah, no, I understand that. It actually leads on. There's a question I was going to ask a little bit later, but I'll ask it now, which was going to be kind of, where do you think radio sits in 2026? But you've kind of put it out there quite clearly. Instead, what if you are someone who wants to, if there's someone who's listening to this or going, well, you know, maybe I want to get out there and try and support my radio a little bit, local radio a little bit more. Like, you know, up here in Newcastle, I listen to 2NUR, local community radio as well. There's a bunch of stations up here. Like, what would be the best thing to do? Engage
in competitions, engage on social media, listen every day, know what your radio, you know, people are talking about. Call up. If you hear something that resonates and you really enjoy it, call your radio station, let them know that you are connecting with them. I think it means the world to them.
Pivoting away from kind of that topic a little bit, I mean, we'll talk about it a little bit more in our little extra episode that we'll do. Do you have a favorite word?
Favorite word?
Could be like a word you use in general. It could be a word you've been forced to cut out of the book a million times in the editing process. Do you have a favorite word?
No, I don't think so. Oh, no, I do. Oh, you know what I had to cut out?
I've never had someone say no.
The word that I had to cut out of the book the most, and the word that I say far too often, and, you know, what makes me a complete bogan? Fuck.
Yes! Yes! Swear words are great.
Yeah, I did have to cut fuck from the book quite a lot. There was a lot of moments, because like I'd get to the chapter and like I'd be like, oh fuck, oh, fuck. And I'd read it and I'd say, yeah, that's what I'd say, or that's what I'd think. And the publisher's like, you might say it a little too much. Let's bring it down. Let's bring it right down. So that was probably the word that was most used in my book that had to be most cut.
Defecation flows trippingly from the tongue. And it's a bloody good word. It's a great word.
That's it. Fucking oath.
Yeah. No, you can swear. It's fine.
I know, it's on radio. Not on radio now.
Not on radio now. Has your child ever said gross to you after you've kissed someone? Because Savage Morgan, though in her defense, it's a very unique situation, I'll point out.
Yeah, I think every kid says gross when they see their parents kissing. I think there's no point where you look, even like as an adult, I mean, my parents wouldn't kiss, but like if I saw like my mum kissing, like my stepdad, gross. Yeah.
It's true. And then my final question for the podcast for today. Are you happy?
Exceptionally.
Yay. That's nice to hear. I'm so glad to hear that you're happy.
Yeah. I love having my book out there. I love meeting people like you. I've really enjoyed, like I've been going to a few regional libraries as well and doing readings, and I just get to connect with people every day, which is my favorite thing to do. I don't think I could be more happy.
I'm so glad to hear that. And I'm very happy today because I get to chat with you about this fantastic, wonderful rom-com, Once Upon a Breakfast Show. For everyone listening, you can get it down in the description. It's published by Text Publishing. If you enjoyed this discussion, we are about to literally go and record an extra little exclusive second show called Second Date, where I chat with Steph more about her reading habits. You can also chat. We'll also chat a bit of spoilers, some spoiler-heavy territory, so a little bit more intricate details. Links in the description for that as well. You can check that out by signing up to my newsletter. But if you enjoyed this, again, get it down in the description. And Steph, thank you so much. It's been an absolute joy having you on the show today.
Nick, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this chat.